All right, let's talk about it. Our WRL Week 9 college football power rankings are out. Joining me right now to talk about it is Luis Fernandez. And of course, it's Halloween week, so some spooky things going on, which is why we're a day late on this. So we apologize for those who may have been waiting for it, but it is out right now. And the main thing is that the North Carolina Central Eagles, for the first time this season, are at number one, and our voters looking at them as the top college football program in the state of North Carolina for this week. I definitely agree with the voters since I'm one of them, and it looks like everybody who voted Central as the number one team. Thought we would have had more for them last week, but this week everybody has been on board and voted the number one. Lewis, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the right decision. They were number three, and Duke and UNC have lost twice now. And two, when you look at just like how other outside folks, right? We talk about with this, it's about comparison of where they are within their own realm, right? And both Duke and UNC are no longer in their top 25. And Central is in the Stats Perform FCS top 25. They are number 12 in the FCS coaches poll. They're like number 9. So they're right up there with the best of the best. They continue to be really good. Davius Richard is really good. He had 7 touchdowns, I mean, against South Carolina State. They're just rolling, and they're playing phenomenal football right now, and I think that shows in what they're doing and where they are in our poll.
And for those who may not be as familiar with, North Carolina Central, what they've been doing this season, maybe last season as well, and also in the MEAC. I mean, South Carolina State is not a team that you just put up 62 points over, right? Like this is a
No.
team that usually is one of the top defensive teams. Not only I would say in FCS, but also just on the MEAC level. And so uh, that's something that head coach Trey Oliver talked about last week. He had a close game against Morgan State, 16-10 the week before. He was like, those are cool. I'm glad we can win those close ones, but man, I really want some blowouts. And he got his blowout against a team that they lost to 3 times in a row before this game.
Exactly. And it's to me, so much of it was the history of it, right? The fact that South Carolina State has always played NCCU very tough. And so to not only win, but to win in convincing fashion, they scored a offensive touchdowns, a lot of offensive touchdowns. They had like 62, 63 points, something like that. They had a defensive touchdown in the first quarter, and then they scored a special teams touchdown on one of the wildest special teams touchdowns I think I've ever seen. The kick returner essentially stepped and tripped on the football, and they scooped it up and was like stumbled into the end zone. It was very odd. But I mean that's just what they're doing. And now the question will be, what do they do moving forward? They've got homecoming coming up later this week. It's going to be really interesting to see what NCCU is capable of. They've got Norfolk State, who is 2-6, 0-2 in the conference. So I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to watch. I see them representing the MEAC again in the Celebration Bowl pretty easily.
Yeah, they're well on their way for that. All right, so here's where I start kind of departing from the voters a little bit when it comes down to our power rankings, because and we have that caveat how teams are doing on their level. Of course, this isn't a head-to-head ranking because we know that Duke and North Carolina, NC State will all be at the top every single week if that were the case. But we have North Carolina at 2, Duke at 3, NC State at 4. Davidson at 5. And this is where I kind of depart from our voters because I kind of felt like Davidson has done enough being 6-2 right now. And they've been having some pretty big wins on their level. I actually put Davidson at number 2, put North Carolina at 3, put Duke at 4. And I don't have NC State sniffing the top 5. Like I just didn't think that after a win over Clemson that NC State has shown us enough, to warrant a top 5 vote. Oh wait, sorry, just making sure Dave Doran isn't coming to punch me real quick. Just want to make sure. I just wanted to make sure because I know that this might get to him and people might talk about it. But I do think that NC State played a very good game and it was a very big win. But before that, they really didn't have an impressive win over a winning program. And even still, like Clemson technically isn't a winning program. They're a 500 team. So, what are your thoughts on how the top 5 kind of rounded out from this power rankings?
Yeah, I have UNC and Duke at 2 and 3, but that's less because I feel like they've earned it, and it's more because I just don't feel like anyone is taking it away from them. Obviously Duke losing on the road to Florida State and then on the road to Louisville. Those are two much better losses, if you want to phrase it that way, than what UNC has done, losing very tight games against UVA and Georgia Tech. But having them 2 and 3, I think it's just the right move at the moment. Because my number 4 is Davidson, and Davidson has been very impressive. 6-0 since their 0-2 start, 5-0 in conference. So once again, you're kind of looking at that, judging from one conference to another, one level of football to another. But they've had some tight wins in there. I'm still having them at 4 just because it would have been a big jump for me. So I'm like, oh, we'll keep them at 4 and see what happens next. They play Presbyterian this weekend at home, and then they travel to Stetson the following weekend. So they still have 4 games or 3 games left. I'm sorry, they played Presbyterian last weekend. My bad. I'm looking at the schedule wrong. At Stetson, at Morehead State, and then versus Dayton. That's what we got going on for them. So, and then I had NC State at 5, and I think I put NC State at 5 because it's still getting a win against Clemson is impressive, even though they're not the most impressive team. For me, it was more about like just the switch for NC State. I mean, Peyton Wilson was calling out their toughness after the Duke loss, saying they just needed to get tougher. And while there's still a lot to be gained, or a lot I still need to see from NC State to have any kind of semblance of confidence in their offense and things like that, they're taking steps. Casey Concepcion is phenomenal. Like he's so good. Him and Peyton Wilson both individually, they carried that team so much in those wins. They both played really well. So I mean, at the end of the day, a win is a win. And State's 1 game away from being bowl eligible. They're 2 and 2 in conference play. So, I give them credit where credit is due. And Western I have at 6. And what's tough with Western is they've played some really hard competition. They beat Chattanooga 52-50 at Chattanooga. They lost by, a couple of possessions, a very tight game there versus Furman, and Furman's very good at their level. And then they have a very tight one possession game against Mercer as well, who is also a top 25 type school. So I'm for Western Carolina, it was more about tight losses, showing that they're competing. I try not to, move teams down if they are playing tightly against very good teams.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, so our last 5, basically, you talked about Western Carolina, they're 5 and 3, but 7, 8, 9, 10, all 4 and 4. Appalachian State, Wake Forest, Elon, and Campbell, respectively. And you look at these games for all of these 4 and 4 teams. Appalachian State versus Marshall. What Appalachian State has shown me this season so far, going against a Marshall team that can definitely score. Not sure if they win that. Wake Forest versus Duke. Not sure if they win that. Elon versus Delaware, best team in the CAA. Not sure if they win that. Campbell versus UNC. They're not going to win that. So all of our 4 and 4 teams, possibility for them to drop to 4 and 5 this coming weekend.
Yeah, it's there's not a whole, like, the last year when you looked at this poll, there was a lot of depth. It felt like there were a lot of really good teams.
Yes.
This year it kind of drops off a little bit, but you still have some like strong competition in there. I still think Elon has had some very impressive moments, beating Monmouth. Monmouth's a really solid team. Competing against NCCU, beating William and Mary, beating Campbell. Like, these are solid wins. These are solid things I think make them deserve to be in that top 10 spot. I have App State a little bit lower at number 9, but I think when you look at App State, what's so hard is the Sun Belt is so good this year.
Yeah.
Like, you've got 8-0 James Madison. You've got 6-2 Georgia Southern, 6-2 Georgia State, 5-3 Coastal, and then you've got that 4-4, 4-4, and 4-4. And that's just in the Sun Belt East. Like, that Sun Belt East is a very good division. So I think App State, they're a team that I think they may be better than what their record shows. And then Gardner-Webb, I also think I put them a little bit higher. I put them at 8 because I felt like Gardner-Webb deserves some love because they beat UT Martin, who is a top 25 team at that level. So there are some teams that are having good moments, but it's just the consistency of that kind of 6 to 10 range is, I think, what those teams are struggling with.
Yeah, I had Gardner Webb in the top 10 as well, with Elon dropping out. But I'm certainly not upset with the voters because of it. I mean, they're another 4-4 team, doing their thing. But hey, we'll see what happens. That was week 9. It could get scary this week for a few teams. Have to say it because it's Halloween. So we'll see what happens, and then maybe we could all talk about it again this coming week. Lewis, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem, Chris.